please help me welcome Dr. Rebecca Preussler.
You're going to get me crying. So welcome. I want to give a shout out to the dads. Love seeing the dads here, in addition to the child care workers. Dads, you guys are super important, and not enough of you guys are able to get away and do things like this, so love it. So we're going to talk about anxiety in our kids tonight, and I'm hoping to have time for questions because I definitely want to try to answer as many questions as possible if I'm not covering some of the things in the slides that I'm going through tonight. So tonight's objectives: to gain a better understanding of what anxiety is, learning what it looks like in our kids, and learning ways to help your kids feel less anxious, because when they are less anxious, they can thrive. So anxiety, who's ever had anxiety, felt anxious? Yes. Okay, it's a normal emotion, and it's a good emotion. I know that sounds weird for me to say that, but it is a good emotion because it is what keeps us motivated, working towards goals, keeps us safe. It only becomes bad when it gets us stuck and keeps us from doing what we need to be doing or we're supposed to be doing. So anxiety, when you're in school, anxiety was what made you want to study for the test so you could pass the test. That's an example of anxiety being good and helping us. But an example of anxiety not being helpful is where you become so anxious that you refuse to go do the activity that you're planning on doing because you're so worried about X, Y, and Z happening. So we're going to be talking about what to do when you realize your kid's anxiety has gone towards the bad side, instead of just staying with the good and keeping us following the rules and doing things that are helpful. So American Psychological Association defines anxiety as an emotion that's characterized by feelings of tension, worried thoughts, and physical changes. So heart's beating faster, maybe we're breathing faster, things like that. Some get hot and sweaty, ears start turning red, things like that. But it is not the same as fear, even though sometimes people kind of use the same term. So we'll talk about what fear actually is, if I can get that to go. Okay. So anxiety is usually future focused, about a what if. Fear is about something in the present. So, fear tends to be more short-lived. So really worried that I am going to try out for this part and that I'm not going to get it, or that I have to perform in front of all these people. So once the performance is over or I've done the part that I needed to do, my fear has dissipated. So does that make sense, how fear is like an immediate thing? Anxiety is like, tends to just linger, and it's bigger. It's always about the bigger what ifs and not just specifically a small thing that can be dealt with and then you move on with life. So now that we have the differences between that, I'm going to try to. I have a chart here for you of common worries for children. So if your kids are worrying about these things, it's okay, it's developmentally appropriate. Separation is a big one for the first 6 years because our kids are so dependent on us for so many of their needs. Once they are old enough to start being more independent, you see that separation one kind of fall away. Now, these are normal, but when separation anxiety becomes so great that you can't leave them with anybody else and get a break, have a date night, that's gone into the unhealthy mode. Usually, if there's separation anxiety, they're crying, they're clinging, but the other person comes along, gets them distracted, and they start playing and they move on with life. The the kid that's moved over into the unhealthy part is unable to be consoled for longer periods of time. And it causes a lot of distress for the parents because it just breaks your heart to know that your child is that distraught. So, 9 to 12 years old, talked about the test, school performance, because it's all about trying to fit in once you get to the upper elementary teen years. And then upper teens, of course, we were worrying about the future, like, oh my gosh, what am I gonna do? I gotta get into college, things like that. All right, so we're gonna try to get this video to work. Okay, so I don't know if you noticed, but as the kids were talking about their worries, they were hitting a lot of those things that were on that chart. Worried about bad guys and spiders and whatever. So anxiety, it feels sometimes to us adults like, what do they have to be worried about? I've had some parents ask me that, like, they're only 5 years old, what are they worried about? Well, a lot. And it's not always going to make sense to us because anxiety is not rational. It is very irrational because God built us with this amazing, I like to call it the smoke alarm in our brain. Its job is to keep us safe. It is always scanning for danger. Now, nowadays we don't have to worry about wild animals and things like they did in the past, but we still have to sense danger from time to time. The thing is, sometimes our smoke alarms work too well. It's going off when there is no danger. So I like to use that analogy a lot of times with the kids because I'm like, have you ever been at home or somebody else's house where the smoke alarm's gone off for no reason? Everything is fine, and they're like, yeah, Mom burned the toast, or something like that. And I was like, yeah, was there any flames? Was there smoke? No, but the smoke alarm went off. It was doing its job too well, and it was going off when it just thought there was danger. So how do we reset the smoke alarm in our brain so it's only going off when we truly need it to keep us safe? That's where we start giving kids tools in their toolbox so that when they are starting to feel anxious or we notice that they're getting anxious, we're able to help them use some of the coping skills that some of the kids started to mention. The one little kid, like, chillax. So how do they chillax? So what does that look like? How do they do deep breathing and some of the other things that might help them chill out? Now, when the smoke alarm does go off, the stress response either gets us ready for fight, flight, or to freeze, because we're either ready to fight off whatever could be harming us, or we're going to run away really fast from whatever could be harming us. And there's times where you're safest if you just try to blend into the woodwork and you just freeze and you're as still as possible so you go unnoticed. So based on that, you're going to be noticing behaviors. And this is why I'm like, okay, some of the behaviors that we see from our kids is not just them being naughty. It might be their fear response. So that's where we have to pay attention as adults. What happened before those behaviors started? Because the ones that are fighters, so working in the clinic, I work with a lot of kids who have needle phobia. It's one of the things that I get to help treat, working with the pediatricians. And I say to them, okay, when your smoke alarm went off, because it's time for a shot, what is your body doing? How are you responding? And they're like, oh, I'm kicking, I'm pushing people away, I'm, blah, blah, blah. So the fighters, or there's the ones that are flying, want to do flight, and they're like trying to escape out the room, running down the hall of the clinic. And then there's the ones who just kind of crawl under the chair and get as small as they can, and they freeze. So we're able to talk about what is your body doing? How can we help it stay more calm so you don't have to do those things? Once they learn this, that gives them so much more control over their body so they don't have to do the things that used to, what they thought kind of worked for them, but we come to realize it didn't really, it just made the whole situation worse because they had to be held down by multiple people in order to get it completed. Now I'm curious, I'm not going to ask for hands, if you notice what you guys do when your smoke alarm goes off. We all do one of those things. And I don't know if you've ever really noticed, but maybe you try to throw yourself into like cleaning the house super well because you're trying to avoid whatever that thing was that was making you anxious, or all of a sudden you're just irritable and your family's like, what is wrong with you? Or you just like want to go shut yourself in the bedroom for a while and not have to talk to anybody. Our kids are not really different. It's just how it plays out, and we don't know what triggered that, so you have to pay attention. So on these slides, it just kind of pulled out some of the different behaviors a little bit more. Trouble sleeping is a big one. Maybe they are trying their darndest to not go to bed. They want to come out for yet another drink of water or ask another question because there's something about going to bed that is making them anxious. Now, they're not going to say, I'm afraid to go to bed. They're just going to keep coming out, keep asking questions, or calling, Mom, come in and give me another hug, things like that. Some kids, finally, once they do fall asleep, then are waking easily, having bad dreams, coming to your room, wanting to crawl into bed with you, things like that. Or start walking and talking in their sleep. That is a big indicator that there's a stress response. I saw a face go, ah. Once again, what can you do to help them feel more calm, kind of get some of those worries out before going to bed at night so that everybody can sleep well? Because if they're not sleeping well, we all know you guys aren't sleeping well either, and everybody needs their sleep. Withdrawal from others, I'd say you see this probably a little bit more with the older children, but younger kids can do this too. Struggling with school is a common one, a lot of stress. Now, most of your kids are probably not school age yet, or maybe hitting kindergarten, unless you have a mixture, but that would be something to watch out for. Definitely the anger, becoming hypervigilant. They need to know, wait, what's going on? I thought we were doing this. Why are we doing that? And they're always asking questions, noticing things. Increased defiance because they're one of the ones that goes into the fight response. So they're like, no, they are not going to go and do anything because they're so anxious that they just dig their heels in. An increased need for control because whenever we're anxious, we all do this. We all try to find ways to control the anxiety. The bad part is it's impossible. We can't control anxiety. We can learn what to do to decrease it and to take care of the issue so we're not feeling as anxious, but we can't control everything in our lives so that we're never anxious or ever worried. So that's where you see some of these things coming out, the frequent questions, the no's to commands, making demands, making you follow the routine that they feel is needed to get to bed. Well, now not only do they need 2 stories, a hug, a kiss, and blah, blah, blah. Now they need 3 stories, a hug, a kiss, another hug from this person, and then the demand, the routine just grows. And difficulty with transitions. Oh, on the way home, we have to stop and get something from the store because we need it for dinner, and there's a meltdown because they cannot handle that the routine is thrown out of whack. So when kids can't tolerate those little things that happen, that's like a sign of they're struggling and they're super anxious. Now, I want you to remember that children's signs can be based on age, so it varies. Personality type, so not every kid is going to fit into these neatly. That's where you might need someone like myself and my colleagues to sometimes help figure out, are they truly just being defiant? Or is there anxiety that's underneath that and driving that behavior? And that's where you guys can start asking child care workers, or child care workers can ask each other to help kind of keep an eye out. What is happening before those behaviors show up, so that we know what is the function of those behaviors that we're seeing. So how to help your child. So on this first one, there's going to be tips for, oh, that looks really small. I'm glad you guys have handouts. For the ones who tend to be more defiant, one, you got to make sure you're setting expectations. Children thrive on routine and expectations. So I like to use this analogy. It was actually a study that kind of proved how much structure and routine and that kind of stuff is needed. What they did is they took horses, and the theory was, if we let them in this open pasture, they're gonna love it. They're just gonna roam and be happy and do whatever. And instead, they all huddled together in this little pack because there was no structure. But once they put them in a fenced-in area, that's when they all spread and did their own thing. They felt safe enough to roam and to graze wherever they wanted to be. Kids are much the same way. They need that structure. They need to know what the expectations are, so then they can just be and do what they are meant to be and do. Because kids just do. They don't really stop and think about what they're doing. They're just doing. They are all about action. But when they know, I can't cross that line, you have some that will walk right up to this line and do whatever they're gonna do. May act like they're gonna cross it, but they don't. Others are gonna stay way far away because they're like, that's the line, I don't wanna be yelled at for crossing that line. But they're free then to play and do whatever they need to do within the boundaries that we've given them. Now, the important part with that too is then we need to be really good as adults at consistently enforcing the rules and expectations that we've set. If we haven't, we might as well not even give them the expectations to begin with. So then we want to make sure that we act and not react, because we are our kids' favorite toy. They love to get a reaction out of us, and they don't care if it's smoke coming out of our ears. They have won, and they think it's the greatest thing ever. But they will really enjoy it so much more if they're getting us to react in more positive, loving ways. We're smiling, we're hugging, we're tickling them, things like that. So that's where, some of these kids, they're feeling anxious, they're feeling out of control, they're trying to control the situation. They're trying to get us to react. And if we do, we're just feeding into it, and then they feel even more out of control because now we've ramped that feeling up for them. Yeah, they wanted us to react, but they didn't realize how that would make things feel worse. So don't mirror their anger. I know it sounds hard, but try to stay calm. This is where tag team parenting comes into play. Sometimes you might need to tag yourself out and tag the other person in order to kind of maintain that sense of calm. Especially because they know how to push our buttons, and if they've pushed one person's buttons, it's not the same as the other person's buttons, so the other person can step in, deal with the situation while the other person goes and calms down. Once again, maintains consistency. And remind yourself that they're impressionable. They're watching to see what we're doing and how we're responding to situations. They're sponges. And sometimes it's cute when they make us, and then there's those times where it's not cute, and we regret that they witnessed us responding in that way. And then we want to pick our battles. So if it's just an annoying behavior, it's not crossing a line, there's no safety issues, what we recommend is that you ignore. Now, this can be really hard. So not completely ignore. So we like to refer to this as selective attention. You're going to ignore that irritating, annoying behavior, but you're going to draw attention to something positive that they're saying or doing. So you're still giving them attention so that they don't ramp up the negative behavior, but you're not giving attention to the behavior that you want to see decrease. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. Because in a subtle way, in a kid way, they're getting the message. If you're going to continue to do that, you're not going to get attention from me, but if you're doing this positive thing over here, I'll give you attention. And they're going to, once again, they want our attention. And then focus on only a few behaviors. It's easy for kids to get overwhelmed by just getting constant negative feedback from us. No, stop doing this, don't do that. Like, just pick one behavior and try to, I know it says 2 or 3, but I would even say just one, so that, and then throw in some positives so that they have some motivation to like keep working towards our positive feedback. All right, so ways to prevent stress and anxiety is consistency. I know I mentioned this before, but it's so important. We need to be consistent as parents or caregivers. If we say, this is a rule, this is an expectation, we need to follow through on that, because then they're feeling less anxious. They always know where they stand with us. They always know what to expect. And they can navigate the other things in life that they're trying to figure out without having to worry about, are they going to get mad at me this time about this thing? I didn't get yelled at the other time, but I did the last time, and that is just too much for them. We need to stay consistent. So if it's an expectation that you know you can't consistently reinforce, don't give it to them. And a good way to start out with this is, if you are setting expectations, take some time to point out the behavior that you're referring to that you do or don't want them to do, so that they start to learn, oh, when I say no, mean touching, you just slapped your brother. That's what I mean when I say no mean touching. So that we're defining it for them so they have a clearer understanding of what we're going to start giving consequences for. Create a list of house rules. Having them posted sometimes can make a big difference. One of my colleagues, her youngest one is a handful, and they would talk about house rules and stuff, but it wasn't until they actually decided to write them out and post them on the wall, all of a sudden that kid was like super good at like noticing and following them to the T. Prior to them just talking about it and not having it posted anywhere, the rule meant nothing. So sometimes making it visual for the kids can make a big difference. And then the big thing too is when we're correcting them, we want to tell them what behavior we want them to do instead of what not to do. It's so much easier to be like, stop running! But that is not helpful for them, because at the ages that most of the kids are at, they don't know how to fill in that blank of what they should do instead. So that's where we want to say, please walk by me, instead of stop running, or Please use your inside voice instead of stop yelling, things like that. Healthy diet and good sleep. I know this might sound weird, but it's super true. We need the good energy from the foods, and we need good sleep, because if not, we are not at our best. The Snickers commercial is true. Like, you're not you when you're hungry. And unfortunately, some of the good boxed items and frozen stuff is super convenient for our busy lives. Is it the best? But do I feed that to my family a lot? Yes, So I'm guilty of not always giving them the healthiest options, but the more we can, the better that's going to be for them. And of course, sleep. So with sleep, we want to make sure that we're establishing really good sleep routines, good sleep hygiene, so that they will continue that process. But this is, once again, where we need to model the healthy eating and the good sleep, where they see us doing things to take care of our bodies too, because once again, they are sponges. I mean, that's part of their learning process, is to watch us and to learn from us. So good sleep habits, shutting off the TV, off phones, putting electronics away, so that our body's natural melatonin can start kicking in and working. It's not going to until lights are dim, there's less stimulation, because that's what signals that part in our body to start ramping up production of the melatonin so that we can fall asleep. And it's important to have that transition time from activity to something more calming, soothing. So TV's off, but now there's a half hour of getting to read, draw, doing something quietly with dimmer lights, turn off the overhead, just have some side lamps on, things like that, to just start setting the scene. So structure, this kind of ties into the consistency, but establishing routines. This is going to make mornings and evenings go much smoother if you have routines where every day they know, okay, now it's time to get up, and then I do this, and then I eat breakfast, and then I do this other thing. So then you guys can get out the door in a timely manner. With the younger kids, I definitely encourage that you create visuals to help them maintain that structure. So making the visual schedule, you might see them sometimes. I don't know if you guys have some of those in your classrooms, but having them for the morning routines, the evening routines is so helpful, because they love getting to go over and see. I like it when we make them with Velcro. So if you do need to switch up the structure a little bit because of a unique situation, you can switch up the order a little bit, but they still have that visual that's going to kind of keep them on task. Then they get to rip it off and put it in the done side. It keeps them engaged, keeps them on task. So having that in a visual form is going to be very, very helpful. Especially if you have kids who already struggle with transitions. If you let them know ahead of time, hey, tonight when I pick you up from daycare, we have to stop at the grocery store and do this other thing. And then if you have the visual already made out where they see what the steps are going to be, they're more than likely you're going to be able to make it through those extra stops without meltdowns. Connect. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with parent-child interaction therapy. Has anyone heard of PCIT? Okay. This is huge. And even if you're not doing parent-child interaction therapy, we know from all the research done for that treatment that it only takes 5 to 10 minutes a night sitting down one-on-one with your child, connecting with them to make a big difference in your relationship with them and how they are functioning. Now with PCIT, we're teaching you specific play therapy skills to use when you're sitting down and playing with them to help change behaviors. But really, even just your one-on-one attention, playing with them, talking to them is going to have a huge impact. So finding that time that you can just fit in, you're not answering the phone, you're not attending to other things except for them, so that they know they are your priority at that moment. Finding humor in daily life. Sometimes we just need to do this, because if not, you're going to pull out your hair and you're just going to be angry and frustrated, and that does not help anyone in the family. It's good for them to see us laugh at ourselves, and for them to be able to laugh at themselves, and just to have pure fun. And then playing as a family. So individually, super important, but also playing as a family, working on those pro-social skills, sharing, taking turns, good sportsmanship, especially if you're engaged in physical activity, to get those endorphins going in their brain helps to improve the anxiety. Because we know from research, once again, that physical activity helps depression and anxiety, but more so with anxiety. So getting them out there, getting them moving, getting them active helps to release some of that anxious energy that we all can have at times. And then we want to help them develop independence, develop their interests and hobbies, so that they see that there is more to them than how well they do something. There is, their opportunity to have choices and to be independent from us, because feeling capable is going to reduce anxiety, especially when it comes to like that separation anxiety. The more that they know that they can count on other adults, or they are capable of doing some things themselves, that anxiety should start to decrease. Now, allowing choices, my little caveat on that is they don't get to have full say. They can tell you what they might prefer, but you guys are still the adults, and you guys get to have the final say. So, because unfortunately sometimes nowadays we want to honor how our kids are thinking and feeling, and we still need to make the final decisions. So on this next one, this is developmentally appropriate tasks that they should be able to do by age. Luckily, hopefully you can read that a little bit better than you can on the slide right now. But so when you can, encourage them to do some of these things that we know that they should be able to do. Now, we need to make sure that we're keeping our expectations of them realistic. So if your child has a delay or of some sort where you know they can't do one of those tasks, we're not going to push them to do it until we know that they've developed the skills for it. But if we know that they have the skills to do a certain thing, encourage them. Let them show that they are capable beings. They're going to thrive off of that sense of accomplishment, plus hearing us give them praise for their greatness that they're showing by helping and doing. And then, of course, modeling. We need to model healthy habits, which I already kind of talked about. We need to model practicing deep breathing. So for some of the kids, they're laughing at me. I don't know if you guys know about Elmo's belly breathing song, but Elmo has a catchy little tune out there that you guys can watch the video and practice doing belly breathing with. If you're sick of Elmo, then don't pull it up. But even Daniel Tiger and some of those others have the videos on doing the deep breathing, talking themselves through a situation that made them feel angry and things like that. So being able to kind of walk through that with them, talking about your anger, your frustration, your worries. I encourage parents to do this because I call it thinking out loud. We do this stuff all the time. We come up to a situation where there is a problem that maybe we are missing an ingredient for dinner. We're like, shoot, that's what I was planning on making for dinner, but I don't have this one ingredient. That's going on in our head. The kids don't know that. They don't hear us thinking through this, okay, well, it's this time. I should be able to get a hold of John, and maybe he can stop and get that on the way home, or you know what, I do have this other thing. I can just substitute that in the recipe and it should be okay. We do that, but they don't get to hear that process unless we say it out loud for them, to give them a template to model problem solving and being able to maybe be like, okay, I shouldn't get so frustrated over this. It's gonna be fine. I'm just gonna take a deep breath and do that kind of stuff. The more that you can do that for the kids, the more helpful that's gonna be, because once again, they're sponges. They're gonna pick up what they see and hear from us. This is where I put the thinking out loud one. I knew I included it in there somewhere because I think it's important. And then managing your mental health. It's so hard to care for them if we are struggling. So if you need to pass the baton to your spouse because you need to go have a good cry, take care of you, go for a run because you have to get out that anxious energy or whatever, please do it. If not, it does come out, it impacts them in ways you may not be aware of, because they sense what's going on with us. They don't know how to think about it, how to identify that. They just know something is wrong. They feel the ick, and then they put their own stuff to it and continue on that way. So they will create their little story about whatever it is that they're feeling that is negative going on with us. They usually will make it about them. Let's see. And then the community. Community is so important. For the child care workers, your input is invaluable. You know, being able to see the kids and notice things and give feedback to the parents and vice versa, parents, for you to be able to communicate to the child care workers about things that you know about your child that works well for them, to have that open dialogue so that everybody's just surrounding this child and helping them to be the most successful they can be. So asking, telling, there's times that maybe something's going on and you didn't hear about it, but you're at home and your child is just kind of off, and they're not going to necessarily tell you, well, Jimmy stuck his finger in my pudding, and that kind of thing. That really got them upset because they knew Jimmy did it on purpose and things like that, but they took it really personally. So that's where reach out to others, ask, hey, what do you do? How did you handle this? And seek the support, not only for yourself, but for your child. So when anxiety is impacting daily life, that's where you want to schedule with your primary care provider, because one, we want to make sure that, and these are examples of times that life might be impacted, that you would, the sleep, making others late, meltdowns all the time, just no ability to handle anything. Because they're going to assess for things that mimic anxiety. There are health conditions that create anxiety. Thyroid disorder is an example of one of them. Diabetes is another. We know mood is greatly impacted by our blood sugar levels. So those are just two examples. So that's why you'd want to check with your pediatrician first, so that we know physically there's nothing that needs to be addressed. And then they can put in the referrals for individuals like myself, or realize, need occupational therapy or physical therapy, because somewhere in the process the child needs extra support in order to be able to continue on with life. Oops. All right, this is question time. Who has questions? All right, back there first.
A lot of the characteristics that explain anxiety. What other conditions, like I have a child that has ADHD, or does that often go along with the
That's a really good question. So she was asking, for those who couldn't hear, what other conditions can go along with those symptoms that I listed for anxiety, because she has a child that has ADHD. Yes. A lot of times teachers think a child has ADHD when they're truly anxious, or vice versa. And that's where you kind of need someone like in my profession to help figure out which way it is, because ADHD and anxiety can be co-occurring. So both things can be happening at the same time, or the anxiety is so great that it looks like ADHD, because we know that attention and focus is impacted by anxiety. We know that they're more fidgety, so it looks like they are hyperactive and things like that. And that's where you just want to get feedback, and once again, that's where trying to look at what's happening before the teacher or whoever notices that maybe they're blurting out more or things like that. We call that a functional behavioral analysis. The counselors at the schools are able to do those if requested. Like if they're in an academic setting, they can do a functional behavioral analysis. If not, that's where you bring them to like myself, and we just try to get pieces of information so that we can determine what's going on for sure. Depression is also, those three are really tight. So trying to figure out, is this more depression going on with them, anxiety or ADHD, or it's a combination. Some of that is also looking at family history, things like that. So, all right, so that, yes, ma'am.
There's lots of, my child she's 9, and she has like really anxiety attacks, and she just uncontrollable. So I got her like a doll, like to help her breathe. Does that count in like making it worse in the future because she's not able to self-regulate now? She's going to be relying on this doll, or is that helping her? I don't know what to do with her when she's in her anxiety attack. Besides just hold her or do whatever is breaks my heart.
Well, yeah, that's horrible when they're in that state. Right now, if the doll is helpful, that's fine. When I mentioned that they need tools in their toolbox, right now that can be a tool, but as they get older, we update those tools so that they're more developmentally appropriate. So the doll might be beneficial for now that she needs something to hug, but as she gets older, maybe she learns how to wrap her jacket around her and pull it really tight so that she feels like she's giving herself a hug, or she has her books that she's holding on to tightly as if she's holding on to the doll or things like that. But ideally, she's in seeing someone where she's learning how to catch some of those telltale signs that it's starting to build so she can cut it off before she gets to that level. Oh, yes.
I have a question regarding giving independence to the children and the chores that are age appropriate. At what point, as a parent or an educator, you are molding the child from your adult traumatic brain, knowing what they can or can't do, and at what point you can be just a vessel and let them take safe risks. Because at the end of the day, like you said, we as adults end up making the decisions. But can children make decisions also and have this boundary of non-negotiable things?
Yes, I think as adults, we need to give them parameters around what they can make decisions about. Because ultimately, we still are the ones that are the authority figures, need to be in charge. So we can say you can choose from this or this. We're giving them the parameters around what they get to choose from or how they get to play with a certain thing or complete a task. Is that helpful?
Yeah.
Okay.
More of the question with giving them that independence that is so necessary, but at the same time holding them by the hand 24/7
Oh.
makes them. Isn't that making them like more anxious in their development?
Yeah, that's why you want to
I'm
help
not
them.
saying you drop them on the floor, but you know.
Right, no. That's where you trust your knowledge, your instincts about the child, knowing what they are capable of doing, and yeah, encouraging them, allowing them to do that, because if we're hand-holding and stuff the entire time, that makes them dependent, that makes them anxious, and we don't want that. We want them to have that sense of efficacy. So, yes, ma'am.
I have a daughter who's 8, and recently she's kind of been struggling. And about a month ago, she started having this fear of like not being able to breathe. What happens if I just stop breathing? Swallowing, dying, things like that. So how, as a parent, I reassure her, your body breathes for you. You're not going to stop breathing. So what would you suggest? Like, to continue?
Like,
It's gotten better.
Okay.
She would get to the point, like, it just happened one night, and she just kind of started breathing heavier, and she needed to get some air, and she just said, I'm just worried that I'm going to stop breathing. I'm worried I'm going to die. And, we talked through it. And then that whole week at school, she was really struggling in the classroom. But now it's gotten much better. She's doing well in school now.
Okay.
I haven't gotten any other calls. She spent time in the nurse's office, in the social worker's office, and they were working on deep breathing. But I, as a parent, felt that was kind of escalating it a little bit. Because she was so focused on breathing. So I don't know if you can just offer any suggestions.
Normalizing the need to stop and do deep breathing. I tell kids, like, this is an important thing. It's so important that all these Apple Watches and stuff that we wear will track that, and it kind of lets us know you need to stop and take some deep breaths right now. I don't know how many of you guys have those, and it does that for you, or you enable that setting, but it's true. We need to just sometimes, and that's another reason why we might sigh or we yawn. It's our body's way of getting us that deep breath. So if we find ourselves yawning and we're not really tired, our body needs us to just stop and take some deep breaths. So you could try to normalize it like that. And do you know what prompted all of a sudden this?
Well, so she was with a friend and had seen a video on YouTube that
Okay.
somebody had cement on their face and they
Ah.
probably couldn't breathe.
Mhm.
So she told me that. I mean, that's kind of what started it.
Okay.
So
So just reassuring, as long as you're not covering your face with cement or other things that are not meant to go on our faces to prevent breathing,
like
we're good.
occasionally I'll see her, like I'll just kind of
Mm-hmm.
be playing outside and then she'll all of a sudden stop and she'll like put her hand on her heart
Mm.
just to make sure her heart's still beating. And I'll reassure her your heart, you're okay.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah, so really drawing attention to, like, it was so fun watching you just run and play, like drawing attention those times where she's not hyper focused on it and just
and it's maybe just a fake.
it more than likely, yeah. As she gets farther away from this, as you're seeing, it's already starting to improve. So I don't. Oh yes.
What is your feel on anxiety and medications?
Sometimes it can be super beneficial. Personally, as a provider, I like to try to meet with the kids and the families for at least 4 appointments using some coping skills first before I want to talk about the possibility of medications.
Because I myself went through some anxiety
Mm-hmm.
issues, and I was taught, and her daughter as well, we were kind of taught to, if you're having your anxiety in that moment, and the breathing escalates, and you try to focus,
Mm-hmm.
use those tools, like the environment that you're in at that
Mm-hmm.
moment, to visualize how many things can count
Mm-hmm.
that are the same, how many things, anything that's around you
Yeah.
that you need to focus on. Is that something that
That's called a grounding technique, yeah, and that's really important. It goes along with, like, I'm sure everybody's heard of mindfulness. It's where you just kind of stop and you just notice where you are, the here and now. So, yeah, you would stop and engage your sensory process. You would stop and at least find 5 things that you can see around the room, noticing the shape, texture, colors, things like that. 4 things you can hear, 3 things that you can, like, touch, and you go on down in terms of just so you can bring yourself back to the moment instead of letting the worried thoughts and everything kind of run away with you. So, yeah, I like to make sure that they have some skills and they're using them first before we'd go down the road of medications, even if there is a family history of anxiety and stuff in the family. So I know we're at our time, so.
Thank you so much. And I want to say, when you're in this position, you want the one thing. Tell me one thing that I can do. I want a deep dive. I'm going to ask my question. Tell me one thing I can do. And her words to my kids, it's a toolbox. And every time your child is anxious, it's not going to be pulling the same tool. So how many tools can we give them? And how many things can we model? Because I really had to come to the realization I was an anxious parent. I was anxious that my child was anxious, and what was I going to do about her anxiousness, which made me more anxious? And I was not modeling good tools. So we look tonight, you're like, I've heard all these things before, but what if you can collectively give these things to your child by modeling them, by talking them through? And that is the gift you gave to my kids. And the best advice she looked Maya in the face and she goes, Maya, do you know how lucky you are that your parents brought you here now? Do you know there's some grown-ups that don't have all of these tools? And she said, you may use the tools I give you, or you may share them with others. She used that language. She said, Mom, there's a girl at school and I think she needs some of my tools. Could I call her? So, I can't recommend Dr. Preussler highly enough. Thank you for showing up for your kids. I hope you found some tools that you will give, that you will model, and that you will share. If you'd like to share this with someone else, you can find it on our website in a few days.